everybody. My name is Melendez. I moved to Tallahassee 6 years ago to purchase a business. Hi, Vincent. To purchase a wholesale distribution company here in Tallahassee. We service North Florida and South Georgia, over 1,200 customers with 3,000 SKUs. My warehouse is in Capitol Circle Southwest. And basically, it was an 18-year-old company that I bought 6 years ago and had to completely reinvent it. So it's exactly like having a startup. And I had a startup in San Francisco, which is where I learned a lot of my startup lessons. But I'm actually going to begin today with a story about my dad. I grew up with an entrepreneurial father, which was awesome at times and then crazy at times. So I just learned these really invaluable lessons that I really love to share because the whole point of in the startup world, is those excitement and people have ideas and we want to change the world. But, are these ideas, is the value transparent, right? Is all the value creation that we're trying to get across, is it transparent? Will it become adopted, used? Will it create that value that we think it'll create? It's really, really, really difficult thing to do. So I was young little Anna in Mexico City, and my father is an engineer. He worked for an engineering company, and he was their marketing director. So imagine this guy is at an engineering company, but he's the marketing director. I mean, my dad's a visionary. He has left right brain. He is he can just really see trends and patterns. And so he's working for this engineering company, and they decide to move him to Columbus, Ohio. So here I am, 7 years old. We're moving to Columbus, Ohio. I had never seen snow before. I was like, okay. And ever since I was young, he taught me everything that he knew about business. And so he told me, okay, you know, so he worked for ABB, which is a Saya Brown Boveri, it's a Swiss company. And it's a massive, massive engineering company. They have a division that, when you're in the airport, someone has to figure out how all the airflow and the AC systems and everything, Saya Brown Boveri. They have a division, pulp and paper division, that's the ABB. And so my dad was in the pulp and paper division. So again, super talented, young executive. And he's like, yeah, I'm selling these pulp and paper machines. Like, what? So he would tell me these stories when I was little. I was like, yeah, I have to sell this huge machine. I'm like, what? That makes paper. I'm like, okay. And like, those little notebooks you have, the Mead notebooks? I'm going today to Mead to present to Mead that they should buy this new machine because their old machine really sucks. And they don't know that, right? They think they have X amount of output and they're like, oh, we're making money. But they don't know that they're losing money and they really need this machine. So he learned a lot of valuable lessons from ABB. And he's like, okay, I have this whole sales force. How am I going to create value creation? So he's like, okay, usually marketing directors, sales forces, they know technical value, right? They can explain the technical parts to it, or they know operational value. This is how it's going to enhance your operations. But the main theme of my talk today in value creation is the finance part. Very few people are comfortable with the economic value creation of things. And this is the core of any type of business across any type of industry, is making money. And how do you make money? Through finance. And these are very, very tough pills that we have to swallow, but this is reality. And so in the entrepreneurial world, you have dreamers. We are dreamers or strategists. Again, we want to save the world, we want to enhance this and that. But at the end of the day, we have to come down to earth and really look at the financial part. Look at your business model. Look at your revenue buckets. Look at the cost and just double them because there's so many unforeseen things that happen. So back to my dad's story. he's selling these machines and he's like, well, dang, I can't close these orders. Why? I have all these marketing tools. I have all this stuff I'm showing to Mead and I can't close the orders. So he sits down and again, he's a visionary. He's like, what talks? Money talks. How can I get through them? Transparent value. I want to sit down and look at every single financial metric and schema and start doing some projections. So he said, okay, and this is in the 80s, by the way, before ROI was a buzzword and everyone was like, oh yeah, zero return on investment, blah, 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 blah. This is in the 80s. And he was sitting down looking at return on investment, economic value added, anything, internal rate of return, any kind of financial metric tied to this machine that he could show Mead and say, listen. So in school, they teach you, cost benefit, this, all these analyses. You have to have your total cost of ownership, what are your costs, your total benefit of ownership, what are the benefits. But he actually coined phrase TRO, which is total risk of ownership. So he would go and say, listen, Mead, I looked at these assumptions here about your machine and what value is not being created, and this is the value that this new machine is going to make. And it's a lot more complicated than that, but overall, it's looking at the value creation and showing that, making that transparent to the purchaser. So they can say, oh, I need this. Because Ruben showed me that every month that I don't have a new machine, I'm losing $100,000 worth of value. I should buy this new machine. Now there's a justification. And so these are really, really early lessons that I learned. And the big thing is, he would sit me down and say, okay, Anna, how do you run a business? How do you sustain even before scaling? How do you just sustain, right? You need to make a revenue. You have your revenue and your costs. Simple, right? You can increase your revenue or you can decrease your costs. Because at the end of the day, what do you need? You need to make a profit, right? You have to make a profit in order to keep going. You could break even, but you have to keep going, right? You have to make a profit. And I said, yeah, okay, no problem. He's like, no, there's a whole other world, okay? So this is the tangible world. The tangible world is a world where you see formulas and they're straightforward and that's it. But what are we? We're humans, right? So humans, we have a whole other thing that happens when you put the human factor into it. So this is the intangible world. So whenever you look at things in business, not only do you need your tangibles, but your intangibles. So he said, okay, Anna, my whole methodology is four-pronged based on these four prongs. It's looking at your revenue. You either increase your revenue or your cost, you decrease your cost. But he said, what if you have an employee that is doing something proactively and they're helping you protect your revenue? Does that have a value? Well, yeah. But how do I calculate it? There's a way. There's a way to calculate these intangibles. It's not as clear cut, but this is the art of a business. If business was a simple formula, everyone would be a multimillionaire. But business is an art form. And so these are the things when you're having your startup that are really, really interesting and really important for you to be cognizant of, that things aren't just cut straight to the point in business. There's a whole art form to it. And so on the cost side, if you have an employee that's proactively doing something to help you avoid costs, that's awesome, right? There's a value to it, right? How do you capture it and how do you put a formula to it? So he was able to create this methodology that was awesome. And so I grew up learning about, Monte Carlo simulations and all these probabilities and all these formulas. But then he also taught me a lot of lessons in business that translate into life, about people, about how you treat your employees, about how you carry yourself as a person, about how you build relationships with all your vendors. And the issue is with a lot of these startups is they want to see, you have the light of the tunnel and you want the shiny star right away. But it takes a lot of patience, perseverance, long-term planning and being, like I said, realistic in order to get to that point. And in order to get to that point, and I mentor younger people, and I always tell them, it's okay, did you take a finance class in school? Did you take math at school? Yes. Did you take this in high school? Yeah. If you went to a technical school or college, have you studied financial statement? Yes. And the big thing is there's a really, really big difference between studying what an income statement looks like with all your positives and your negatives and a balance sheet and living through financial statements and living them and learning these lessons. So the most important thing when you have a startup, it's not really your idea, right? Your idea could be great, but the monetization part of it, you have to be so realistic about how you're going to make money. And so all of that really has to be realistically ironed out in what your projected parts of your financial statements will be. And so I tell people, a lot of people don't feel comfortable with learning and don't feel comfortable with the numbers. And the best way is through examples. And so I can study income statements and balance sheets all day. And you can do that too. It doesn't mean anything, right? Numbers need context. Numbers, you could have a beautiful income statement, beautiful balance sheet, and it could be a company that's failing, but you think they're not failing, but they're failing because there's some context behind it. Because maybe that's an income statement that looks great this month, but there's other factors that you don't see that are coming in the next quarter that could hurt that company. So it's really important to know how to look at your numbers in your startup and how to be realistic, how to look at the short term versus the long term and really have a plan. And the most important really is having mentors. There's certain things you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to have all these horrible things happen to you because it's really, really hard. And even if I bought a company that was already successful, I went through really, really hard mistakes that I had to get through because it was just like having a startup. And so the big thing is if you have mentors, they can tell you, like I told you the story about my dad. I could tell you a million stories about A&E Wholesale and all the things we did wrong. All these stories have to be really ingrained in your brain so that you can take from those stories and look at your business and say, oh my God, I'm on the path to that. How do I not go on the path to death? And this is an exercise that I do a lot with these entrepreneurial younger folks is to write your obituary. If your company, let's say, my name's on, but I have A&E Wholesale. If A&E Wholesale was a person and A&E Wholesale was to die tomorrow, next month, in a year, why would it die? Oh, customers keep telling us that our phone system is messed up and it's hard to get through to customer care. What are we doing? Are we ignoring it? We're losing customers? How can we relieve those pain points and go back and say, oh my gosh, people are giving us these nuggets of gold, but we're not doing anything. So it's really, really important for you to have these examples, mentors, be realistic about what you're doing in your company, and really, like I said, it's awesome to dream, but just be realistic. And sometimes, my dad has been through a lot of different businesses. He had to pull the plug and say, this is just not a scalable model. And so model creation, all of that is really important. But again, you have to make that effort. You can get so stuck in living your world and in your mindset of what you're doing and getting that tunnel vision and just being like, I know I can grow, when you could be also doing other things. One of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life was interviewing with McKinsey. If you don't know who McKinsey consultants are or who McKinsey is, please look them up. They are like, the movie The Firm with Tom Cruise. I mean, this is like when Fortune 50 companies don't know what to do. Their backbone is McKinsey. They're like, hey, I need a dude that's an expert in strategic pricing or strategic cost frameworks, and they got a guy. So there's a book. So I interviewed with McKinsey, and it changed my life. It changed not my life, not just my life professionally, but even personally, because it teaches you how to rewire your brain and how you think and how you solve issues, not just not just large fundamental business, but also smaller issues in your life. And so there's a couple interview books. So the way that McKinsey interviews is they sit you down and they give you a business problem. They call them business cases, but really it's just a business problem. So this company is, and it's a problem, right? So they want to see your thought. How are you thinking about solving these problems? So they're like, okay, so you live in Hawaii and you have a little surf shop and you sell these little surfboards, but you haven't been growing, you're not really that profitable. What are you going to do to grow your business? So you have, and part of this McKinsey interview process, they teach you about decision tree making, how to start breaking problems down and look at the decision trees and start fine tuning your process of your thinking. So you say, okay, the population of the United States, let's say it's 350,000. Out of 350,000 people, these many people live in Hawaii. Out of the people that live in Hawaii, this many people can have access to my surf shop. Out of those people, there's the X amount are women, Y are men, Z are children. Oh my God, I could sell a line of surfing wear. But then how much would I need? What would be my cost? Do I need distribution? All of this type of thinking holistically about your business is extremely important because there are so many touch points. It's not just your product or your service, right? You have your marketing, you have your operations, then you have layer all the long-term planning. So when you look at value creation, it's value creation is such a broad term, right? So you really have to define it. And the most important, like I said, is looking at the financial part of value creation. How can you make an economic value creation model that is clear and that is profitable, right? And then in the long term, you can have $100 million business and be in the red, right? If you're not managing your costs. And you can have, let's say, a $1 million business making $200,000 a year and you're super happy with that. So a lot of the value creation and what you want, how you define value creation is up to you. What are your goals? What do you define as success? Do you want to make this amount of revenue? Or do you really want to invest? So what I did with A&E, I said, I'm going to take a 10-year as a BA loan. So I know I'm going to be highly leveraged and have a ton of debt. So I was realistic about it. I'm like, I'm not going to make that much money until I pay down my debt. But that's a 10-year sacrifice that I had to make in order to actually make, I have 4 more years to go. 4 more years to go. But and I think that's a lot of the misconception that startups are sexy, which they are, but it's really, really, really difficult because if you look at overall, even just general businesses that have been successful, and look at the business model. Look at taxis. All of a sudden, boom, Uber. All of a sudden, boom. So a change here, a change there. You always, if you don't know much about game theory, also, game theory is really awesome, really fascinating. Really always looking at your competitive landscape. Just start thinking 5 chess moves ahead. Pre-COVID, I wrote my obituary for A&E. Said if A&E was gonna die, what would happen? And part of it was we buy a lot of inventory from Costco, believe it or not. Costco has a huge side to their sales that is for commercial businesses. And so we were buying like $100,000 a week from Costco. And I said, what happens if all of a sudden Costco's like, see you later, Anna. We're not gonna sell any Swisher Sweets anymore. Well, I'm kind of screwed, right? So since the beginning, again, all this, you look at the risk too. You look at game theory, you look at your numbers, and you look at possibilities. I said, crap, what happens if Costco completely discontinues cigars? So I started planting these seeds with different, I found a distributor in Tampa. I found one in West Palm. I went physically, introduced myself, showed not, and the big thing is, no one is going to fight for you. I mean, hopefully your employees will, but at the end of the day, you have to do it for yourself. You have to be the face of your company. So, all these relationships, I went to Tampa, like I was telling you, I went to West Palm, said, hi, my name is Anna. I showed them I have a 10,500 square foot warehouse. I'm growing. I deliver to all the gas stations. I deliver to all the convenience stores, all the liquor stores. And this is what I'm trying to do. And when people hear your story and believe in you, they try to help you. You cannot do it alone. You can't. And if you're a control freak, like a lot of us, we know we have our startup, we're awesome, I want to do it this way. You have to have that balance of being open to help, being open to your mentors, being open to your advisory board. And so what happened during COVID, and even, okay, let's step back. Before COVID, Costco was like, hey, Anna, we have a new GM. And I'm like, oh, great. The old GM loved me, knew us, we had a relationship, and he specially stocked items for me. Now, my game theory, all these things that I was like, what if this happens? What if this happens? Is panning out, is becoming a reality. This new GM from Seattle comes to Florida with all his eco, which I love eco stuff, but he's like, no more cigars. I don't know about these cigars. And I'm like, oh crap. Now they're dwindling their inventory. Now I can't have access to these things. I'm like, do you know we have fishermen and hunt, this is Florida. He didn't care, right? He had a completely different vision for this Costco. And please, if you ever meet him, do not tell him that I told you. Just kidding. He's a great guy. He's a very great guy. He comes from a long line of Costco corporate people. But, this is the realist part, right? Not everyone is going to understand or be with your vision. So you have to plan for it. So whenever that happened, I went to other sources and built the relationships. And during COVID, as we all know, we had a massive, massive impact on supply chain. And we had all sorts of supply chain problems. But what do I have to do? All the gas stations are open. You guys need gas. But not only that, you guys are like, oh my God, I'm scared to go into the Walmart because there's people, whatever. I'm just going to pick up some candy at the gas station. I'm going to just, so our sales shot up, but so did the demand. And so the supply was really, really short. And so these people in Tampa, the people and all these people that I created these relationships over the past 6 years, they have a lot of customers. Why would they choose me? They have customers that are 10 times bigger than me. And when I was trying to get product for all you guys in the gas station picking up your candy and your chocolate, it was because I created these long-term relationships. And I had people, distributors from all over, even we get our candy from a distributor in the Bronx, New York. They're awesome. So even that, all these different suppliers, because of our relationships, they didn't have to give us the product. They chose to. They prioritized A&E Wholesale over other customers to give us product because of the relationships. And so as you're building your startup model, whether you're a startup or like I said, whether you're buying a business, it's also a startup. I bought an 18-year-old business that literally I went through all the startup things. So whether any kind of way that you're running a business, like I said, the value creation part's really important to be super, super realistic about what your revenue buckets are, what your cost buckets are, just double those costs because there's unforeseen circumstances. And then look at the soft side, right? You have your tangible world of these tangible things, and then you have your intangible world of all these human things, of all these other things you have to do, of the people part, which is the secret sauce. How do you get a team to believe in you as a leader? How are you stern but also caring. How do you get people? And that is the hardest part of our business world. And like I said, business, you have all these formulas and you can study macro and microeconomics to death. But at the end of the day, people, there's another lesson my dad taught me. People buy from people. People buy from people. It is so important. And I think as I've gotten older, I've learned really, I was really trusting at first. And so you have to be very, very careful, extremely careful. And again, you have to separate a lot of these things too. As much as it's important to build your relationships and let people in your lives, you also, I have a story. So I ran a brand when I was 26, like 20 years ago, when I worked at a $6 billion distributor in Chicago. I ran a $60 million line of private brand ink and toner cartridges. It was a fascinating. And you have these old school kind of ways vendors, and they take you golfing and you smoke cigars and drink scotch and blah blah blah, which is awesome, which is great. I really enjoy that. But you have to be very clear when you're growing and when you're maintaining your business. Very, very clear with the vendors. I would point blank tell them, you step a foot in my office, I'm like, I love you. But you step a foot in my office and I'm gonna have to have the right quality at the right price with the right the right business terms, accounts, payment terms, everything. And that's another point that I wanted to tell you guys. The the beauty and the art of this world with business has to have win-wins. You have to have win-wins. You can be a master negotiator and you can win it all and the other side loses completely, and then you never know when you'll need that person, and you're short-sighted and you win in the short term, but the long term, done. So you have to be very, very strategic about how you're handling your conversations with people, your relationships with people. It really, really is important for you to look to the long term. I know I've covered a lot of different subjects, but I wanted to see if anyone had any questions regarding any of the different facets that I talked about. Do you want me to just I can keep telling stories, stories all day, but no, yes, one question.
What was the most challenging part for you when you started your business?
You mean with A&E or with my
A&E.
startup? A&E? Okay, so that's a very loaded question, and it's a very good question. The hardest part, I think I always really relied on accountants, and I used to have a whole accounting department. I used to have inside counsel when I worked at a $6 million distributor. And even though I learned from them, the biggest challenge was not being realistic about, like I said, the economic value creation, the actual finances. And so I bought a company that was supposed to be a turnkey business, but when you open the hood, when you peel the onion, when you look at the core, there's things that may not be right. So if you don't know your accounts receivable, the thing is your accounts receivable could look awesome, but when you look at the aging, if you have an issue with people not paying you for a long time, that's a huge problem. Accounts payable, if you're not managing your payments, all those core financial things that I should have attacked on day one. So I usually, when I run businesses, I call them my 30 days in office, and my 60 days in office, and then my 90 days in office. And I usually go for all these I used to be more of a dreamer, right? So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make this branding awesome. I'm going to rebrand A&E. We're gonna be the coolest thing in distribution. We're going to make distribution cool, and the sales will come. Nope. No matter how cool you think you are, if you do not have those fundamental financial metrics, you cannot survive. Like I said, basics. Revenue, what are your revenue buckets? Costs, double them because who knows what mistakes you're going to do. Hopefully, not that many. But really, the hardest part was not having someone and really being realistic that no one's going to do it for you. You have to do it. You have to study your own income statement. You have to look at all your gross profit. You have to look at your EBITDA. You have to look at your net income. If you don't know what any of that means, go learn what it is. You have to. Don't be scared of an income statement. Don't, balance sheets are a little different. Don't be scared of them either. But your income statement, do, and then you have your cash flow, which is a whole other world. But as much as you can learn and be hands-on with your finances, and like I said, go find someone that runs a business, go find someone that's an expert, have them. A lot of people, you'd be surprised, will show you. They don't want a lot of people to know how they're doing, but there are mentors that will show you, here's the mistake I made here, this is how I did. But the fundamentals of finance, do not be scared. And like I said, there's so many cool books out there. I know I told Julia about Crossing the Chasm by Michael Urquhart. He is a fantastic author, strategic thinker. You get through these life cycles like in business, but with startups, it's like a smaller bell curve. Like, how do you cross over? How do you make it to scalability? Which is really, really hard. And also, I wanted to tell you, scalability also has different definitions. So what you think is scalable could be different from what you think is scalable. And it has to be what you want for your business. How you define the success. Because I can tell you, yeah. Well, I can tell you, in the beginning, when I bought A&E, I'm like, ah, I'm gonna pay down my debt in 5 years. I'm gonna grow by 5x in 10. It's gonna be awesome. And oh my God, because of those fundamentals were missing in the business, I had to literally stop, do no strategy work, and do fundamentals. Once you have that core and that engine running smoothly with the finances, then you can look at your strategic growth.
I know you mentioned that you had experience with a startup in San Francisco, and then you have had experience with having to buy a business and then pretty much making it profitable. I know that for those of you who don't know, like she pretty much flipped this business around, like from the red to profitable. And so I guess my real question is for someone considering a startup or buying a business, which direction would you go? Because I know right now something's trending where more people are actually realizing buying a business is a better way to go because success rate is a little higher than starting something from scratch.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you with that, unless you, by some magic of God, you have some kind of unicorn. Like, how do you know, right? So, and that's the thing with startups. With startups, it doesn't necessarily have to be from scratch. You could still have mentors, and you still could not reinvent the wheel if you have an amazing like product service, but look at the world where we are today, right? And one of the you don't need your MBA to read about all this stuff. If you don't know Porter's five forces, go read about Porter's five forces. If you don't know about the VRIO, go learn about VRIO. And the big thing about these core frameworks, again, something that I learned a lot about with McKinsey, is the VRIO. So my mistake, I'll tell you the story about my startup. The most valuable part of VRIO, which was from my strategy professor at Ohio State, I got my MBA from the Fisher College of Business, is the I. So VRIO, the I is inimitability. So what happened was, I was like, okay, I worked for this Fortune 500 company, the largest $6 billion distributor of office products. I learned so much. I had this awesome idea. I said, I'm going to revolutionize the world of office products. How you buy your office products? I got you. So I got my partner, was my vice president, my boss, and he took all this money out. I took money out. We're like, oh my God, we have the best idea. We're so smart. This is so awesome. And in San Francisco, you catch the bug, like the startup, the buzz. And we hired the best designers, web designers. So in the web world, I mean, back then it was like 2012, there were frameworks and they were very, very pushy. There's frameworks on how to search. You can't go against the frameworks. These are the frameworks. I said, no, I'm trying to revolutionize how people search. And I said, if you go to officemax.com, back then it was Office Max and Office Depot were not together. You go to officedepot.com, if you go to officemax.com, you go to staples.com, look at those websites. Try to find a mouse. There is no word as mouse. It's called a computer peripheral. Who in the hell would search that? I don't know. I said, I'm going to make this awesome website, and it's going to be a curated website. So I took all these cool things I learned from fashion, because I love fashion, I love beauty, makeup. That's my jam. Spas, awesome. So I said, I'm going to take all this cool stuff from the beauty industry and layer it onto office products. And I got 3 major design awards for the searchability that I created, not just text, but the visuals. So I took, when you go to those clothing brands, and they like have a little suit jacket and a pant, you click on it and it takes it to the product category. I did that all for office products. It was curated. So like if you try to find a mouse on staples.com, you found 600 options. How the hell are you gonna find the mouse you want? If you went to my site, from 600, it was like maybe 100, and they were organized. These are the trackball mice. These are the laser mice. These are the big mice. These are the little mice. It was awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. What happened? 6 months, Office Max copied my entire thing. Entire thing. Bye. Gone. Poof. Right? I had this awesome idea. I got all these awards. Everyone thought I was so cool, and I couldn't scale. And there goes $1 million. Bye-bye. Done. So, I try to really tell people that have these awesome ideas, put your idea through all these models. Porter's 5 forces. Are there barriers to entry? Can someone just come and copy you, even if you have a patent? My father had a patent for his Genius software, and he trained thousands of professionals at Microsoft on this economic value creation methodology. He helped Microsoft with all their patch management, like corporate, enterprise level accounts, to help them close their accounts, their sales. And guess what Microsoft did? In like maybe 5 years, they learned everything from my dad. They took his whole methodology and called it REJ, and then they have it. What's my dad gonna do to Microsoft, right? So you have to be really, really, really careful about that inimitability. What makes you unique? Like I was asking, you have the sprays, but do you have something unique? Is it eco? Is it something different that is not available from other brands? And that's the hardest pill to swallow in the startup world, is being realistic and really seeing. Versus what I did with A&E, you get all the fun of the startup, but your base, you have at least a core of something that has been in operations. But again, with game theory, you have to make sure this isn't something that is going to become obsolete. Like, hey, I just bought a cab and Uber launched. And then what? Yes, Vincent.
Extraordinary information. I have a question though around, because I know you be one of the most resilient people that I know. Like you've gone through a lot, but you just keep building, right? And I'm really, really, really passionate about and really thinking through, like, what are the core traits? Like when you say, okay, the thing that I lean on the most, even when things get like super hard, what trait or what core thing do you lean on the most that keeps you going, that helps you keep fighting, keep building, keep creating, keep moving forward?
Well, I think my core trait, I know this may sound really weird, but it's just money, people. It's, it's just money. And I think the biggest thing that keeps me going, the trait that that brings me joy is I love nature, I love people, and I've been hurt so, three of my employees robbed me. We almost went out of business because of a employee theft rate. That you can't, when it comes to business, I'm a Latina, right? I'm a very emotional person. I love to love. But when it comes to business, you have to really have a different hat on. And I think that the resilience when it comes to business is you have to understand that there's a way, even if you go bankrupt, there is a way. You can lean on mentors, you can lean on people, like I said before, they want to help. And so obviously you want to try your hardest, you want to try your hardest not to be in these type of predicaments, but the core traits really is to think of future, think of it, obviously we need money to survive, but don't let money overtake you, because if you build a business, if you do something in a way where, like I said, the financials, everything on the core are right, it will grow. And if it's not, be realistic and move on and do something else. Take your losses. I mean, I made $1 million mistakes. And we have Becky Tolnay here who is in charge of Vistage. And so this group, Vistage, when I moved to Tallahassee, it's a group of CEOs. And as the owner of a business, of a startup, or whether you buy one, it's lonely. You can't always just tell people all your crap, right? Because then your mom's gonna be like, "What? I thought you were doing awesome." Don't tell your mom. I'm just kidding. No, you you need a support group. So one key trait, like I said, I used to be very much like a control freak, and I couldn't do that anymore. I had to let go and be able to trust. And so when I was going through these really horrible times, I have John Bell from Colony Bell in our group. We have Laura Johnson from Cotton Colors. I mean, we have these executives, these business owners that have had all these horrible things also happen to them, and they got me through it. And again, a lot of this, and now with the world of social media and mental health, and you see all these people that show themselves as successful. It's kind of like a relationship, like, Susie and Tom are always awesome at the party. You don't know what's happening behind closed doors, right? The same with a company. You really don't know what's happening behind closed doors. So don't, I would say, don't give up. Sometimes, you may feel a little deflated, like, oh, why is everyone so successful? A big thing also, trait, don't compare. I think a lot of people, personally and professionally, they compare themselves to other businesses, they compare themselves to other people. Comparisons are good if you can pick out patterns and learn from them. They have their purpose, but as a person, as your own feeling and your soul, you have to maintain a sense of calmness so that you can get through all these things that will happen. And if you have support groups like that, all those friends, I can tell you, I called John Bell at like midnight and he answered. I said, I don't know what to do. I said, we're going to form a Tiger Team meeting and we're going to think about options. We're going to help you. So, traits, being open minded, being realistic, having us trying to let go of the control and have the support group. And I know sometimes that was the hardest part for me. And yeah, those are the solid three.
You mentioned that you took out a SBA loan.
Mhm.
In that, because you know you're not going to be making so much
Mhm.
money in the next few years or whatever, do you include a salary or like a living wage in that loan that you asked for? Or
So we had a great question. What's your name?
Jasmine?
Jasmina had a great question for you guys that are watching now about the SBA loan process and if you pay yourself. And so I was in a really unique situation where my husband has a completely separate job. So we knew that whatever he was making, if I had the option of not paying myself, I could take that option. And so now I pay myself minimum just to have something because there's some rules for accounting because it was a ROBS transaction, which you take your 401k in order to have an asset purchase. So kind of a segue to your question is before you get an SBA loan, you have to really do a lot of research of do you want to be an S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC. There's all sorts of accounting implications. And that's another thing that I used to hate. I was like, accounting, I got a person for that. No. You have to know what the heck you're doing because accounting has two major parts. The every day-to-day bookkeeping, budgeting, accounting, and the strategic accounting. What really is your goal? What do you want to do with your company? And so some people want to make money right away, right? So that's a completely different model. And so you really have to ask your questions again. If you want to get an SBA loan out and you want to pay, you say, I need this much to survive and a little extra. I want to make this much a month. Sit down, get a really awesome accountant. They're worth it. Get a great strategic thinker accountant that can sit down with you and take a look at those things realistically and say, okay, if you want to pay yourself down, you have this much debt, you have to cover these costs, this is how much money you have to make, this is your gross profit you're going to make on your product based on your industry or your service, and then these are all your expenses. So this is your earnings before your EBITDA, and then you have to look at your net income. Like it is a lot of work, right? I manage a business that's 1 to 2% net income. That is crazy. I don't have room for error, but I'm a distributor, right? So I have a massive amount of transactions. But like the inside theft ring that I had, that was really difficult because that was basically more than the profit. So now I'm trying to make up for that. So SBA loans, they sound really cool. I mean, they are really awesome, really cool. But be realistic, whether it's 5 year, 10 year, and think about your accounting and how you want to make your entity. Yes.
Is there insurance that you can buy to protect against those situations where an employee will steal or anything?
Yeah, so there is insurance. I'm like, I got people to look things over. Nope. You look at it. You look at every single contract, everything you sign. I don't care. Just go to the park, have a glass of wine, whatever. You have to read it. And so I shall remain nameless. This insurance company, they're the best in Tallahassee. I didn't know anyone in Tallahassee, right? So 6 years ago, I had no idea. It's like, no, they've been using this company for a long time. They're the best. Da, da, da. I'm like, okay, give me exactly how they had the previous owner. Boom. I want that. It's full coverage. They're like, yeah, you're fully covered. Do. Perfect. Sign. Theft ring, horribleness. Oh my God. Thank God that in 6 months I discovered it because my financial statements didn't make sense and I saw them on camera how they were doing it. But it was really a genius idea. But I mean, these guys were so creative. I wish they could put that for good instead of bad. But they're like, no problem, you're covered. We're gonna give me your inventory. And I'm like, here's the inventory report. Da-da-da. Here's everything. They took this in these SKUs. They took this in these SKUs. I have video evidence of them doing everything. I had everything. So I'm like, oh, thank God. The insurance company calls me and said, oh, these were your employees inside your warehouse. No one broke in. So you're not covered. Here's $15,000 for $300,000. Dead. I mean, if I didn't have, there was the distributor in Tampa. I told him what I said. I just got robbed, and he had been through robberies. He gave me $100,000 worth of cigars and gave me over 6 months to pay. To this day, I send his wife like a little crystal flower or like something, you know. And again, this is a relationship. He would have never given me $100,000 if he didn't know me, if he didn't believe in me, if he didn't believe that I would pay him. So insurance is a really, really tricky thing. You have to look at everything, whether you're buying a house, whether it's your rental apartment, whether anything, just read it all. Insurance is worth it. And you have to make sure you budget for whatever insurance that you need in your industry, but ask all the questions, please, because it was devastating to hear, nah, just kidding, JK, just kidding. But that was tough for me. Any other questions? How are we doing on time? We're good? 10 minutes? All right. Let's see. But yeah, one thing, I'm really glad that all of you showed up. That means a lot to me, not only to me, I know to Julia and our community, but one thing being new to Tallahassee 6 years ago, I can tell you standing here, I don't feel new. So it has been really cool to be part of a community that's caring. And I listened in yesterday to see, Eddie talk about and Corey talk about these different things. And I know we have Scott Baylock here. He's trying to do all these really cool things for our city. The things that are happening now and people trying to connect are really, really cool. And, I texted my employees, like my management team today, because they're like, why, we miss you. We want to see you. And I showed them a picture of me being, a speaker. I said, we're a part of something big, you guys. I said, I know I've been doing a lot of community work. I'm the board treasurer for the Carney Center. I really love giving back. I'm on the board for Second Harvest. Food insecurity, homelessness, all these things are really not good in our community. So anything that we can do to help Tallahassee is going to be awesome. And like I said, we have all these really cool gems, like Scott, Becky, Vincent, I know is doing a lot of stuff. All these gems that are trying, Julia had just met and asked me, trying to really connect. And I was glad to hear a lot of the points made yesterday. And how do we not reinvent the wheel and help each other and say, hey, I know you want to do this, but this is how I failed. These are my stories, and sharing those stories are so important. So I'm really glad to see that we have a really nice mix of people, and I'm sure it's different industries, but use those resources. I know yesterday they talked a lot about the FSU, the Jim Moran resources, the FAMU resources. We also have a lot of community resources for free. I had no idea. There's certain things I wish I knew 6 years ago that I could have taken advantage of. So you just being here means a lot that you really want to succeed in our community, and we want to keep you in our community because I think Tallahassee, it's the smallest town I've ever lived in, and I've never seen such enthusiasm with people trying to help each other. And really trying to be open-minded about the areas in our community that need help and how can we not just throw money at it and give solutions that we think are their solutions, but really listen and say, hey, community X, what is happening? Why do you think there's what, and listen to each other and try and come up with solutions together. So I'm really excited that we decided to stay here because we were going to be kind of transient, but we're going to stay in Tallahassee and watch it grow and be part of the community. So my husband might have a little 8-year-old too, and that's another thing. The vegetation, if you don't know Tall Timbers, it is awesome. Schedule a tour. It is super cool. You learn about the little birds and the vegetation. I mean, I never knew about the red hills. You see some gas stations named Red Hills, but there's a meaning. There's red clay hills. I mean, we're sitting in a really unique spot. We're not mid-South Florida, but then we're not Georgia, and we're really unique, a really unique community. And then to think we have all these different areas around us, like Monticello, Perry, Quincy, each one has their little gems and they're growing. I see it on my routes. Even Georgia, Valdosta, we had to double our route because of the demand. That's how much that town is growing. So the growth is really exciting. I know yesterday we talked about the airport. I hope that has been a thing for people that my husband and I that fly internationally a lot. Hopefully that will start growing and we'll see that. But the San Francisco startup lessons were really cool. If anyone ever wants to hear more crazy stories, I have a lot. But that was a really unique time in my life. And I also lived in Abu Dhabi, which was also really interesting, especially with the dynamics of women. I could give a whole talk about being a woman in distribution. I think I'm like one of 2 women distributors in the state of Florida. So, you have other things that you have to deal with. But, if you stick to your core values, all that kind of just washes off and you don't take things personally. A lot of the things, I don't know if you guys read the Tallahassee Woman magazine. I'm in the section for women who meet in business. And I talk about the cultural differences. Sometimes people really get offended. And I've had to go to gas stations and tell them, I'm sorry, sir, I didn't say hi to you. I meant nothing, please, I would love to have your business. What can I do? And so when it comes from a cultural perspective, we also have to be open-minded and not take things personally. That's again, business is an art form. There's no special formula. It is super fun. You'll go through trials and tribulations, like we all do. But the more you can get mentors, especially in different industries, really cool. Because there's so many similarities in just core framework things that you should know.
I'm going to go ahead and say thank you so much for being here, Anna, and thank you all for being here. I helped Robert and Domi co-organize most of the events for this week. It's kind of a challenging week before the holidays to try to get a bunch of folks in the community to come out, but I love how so many of you have come out for Anna's event. We do encourage you to continue to share with everybody the upcoming scheduled events. Check out the schedule, domystation.org/TLH Startup Week. And I'm really thankful for all the sponsors and our venue partners to make this week happen. And it's really about making sure that everyone has the opportunity to connect in all kinds of, corners of our community, really. So that's why there's 13 tracks, 13 plus or 14. There's kind of overlap, but there's about 50 events that goes across all these industries so that we can pretty much collide. Robert's favorite word, collisions. Let's make more organic collisions happen throughout the week, and thanks again for coming.
Spin out that email going out this one more weighing in, right? So that they can have Tallahassee these ideas. I know we've talked about things. Yeah. Join the movement or log in and then take their
Don't leave without So to the point where you're like, wow. Yeah, I tell them all the time, they order what do you do when you're out here?
She doesn't just sell a cup, she sells a cup that can be white or blue or red. That's just nice to meet. And just for me, I'll, you can at least go to history shopping and stuff. Design for companies. Because it might not be just the industry.
I don't understand.
Yeah, so like, go to the store, and they're all equal, so they've never. And then, so like, imagine right now, and then our team goes on the inside. So we created, that was Melendez hired, that person sold it. Yes. It's super cool. Not really.
Yeah.
It's super cool. What's this? I see this dude. This year, very first one was in world 100% never trained all members. Then they competed. There were 8 16 teams, 14 is 2 medal scholars that were in world that pitched to first place. The very first time this ever happened, we had this complete hybrid experience with the bridge, what we call metaverse IRA bridge, where you have the physical world now, and then like some of the students that were in the class, like medical school, well, let me do my like I'm doing. I was saying, yeah, it's slow. Because that's the easiest time. Our metaverse so those three metaverse collaborating on whiteboards, training, learning, like I got it. Yeah, and so right? So we got not only the students, so when they go to school, that's the whole boss versus